I never thought silence could hurt this much. The kind that fills a house like smoke after a fire. Thick, choking, impossible to breathe through. My name is Tom Carter, 72 years old, father of one, grandfather of two. And for the first time in my life, I feel like a stranger in my own family. You think the worst pain comes from losing someone you love, but that's not true. The real pain comes later, when the people you lived for start acting like you died too. It started with a whisper. Dad can't live alone anymore. Then another one. He'll be safer with us. And then came the look, pity mixed with obligation. The one that means your independence is about to be packed into boxes labeled for donation. After my wife Mary passed last winter, I thought moving in with my son David would help fill the silence. He and his wife Claire had 2 kids, Emma, 12, and little Luke, 9. And their laughter had always been the sound that kept me going through the long nights after Mary's chemo treatments. I thought maybe, just maybe, living with them would heal something broken in all of us. But I was wrong. It took exactly 3 weeks for Claire to decide I didn't belong. At first, she smiled that polite stretch smile of someone doing community service. "We're happy to have you, Tom," she said, moving my things into the small guest room near the laundry. "It's just temporary, until you get your footing again." Temporary. That word clung to me like mildew. David meant well. He always does. But he's the kind of man who apologizes to the wrong person. When Claire started setting rules, he stood behind her, nodding like an obedient shadow. "Dad, just so things stay easy for everyone," he said one night, not meeting my eyes. "Try not to use the kitchen after 9. Claire has early calls." "Calls?" I asked. "Real estate," he mumbled. "You know how demanding her clients are." I nodded. I always nod. It's easier that way. The next rule came a few days later. "We don't really eat fried food here, Tom. Maybe keep that for lunch when we're not home." Then it was, "Please knock before coming into the living room when we're working." And Luke's teacher says old-fashioned discipline might confuse him. Maybe let us handle homework. By the end of the month, my presence had been trimmed down to something polite and invisible, like furniture, useful when needed, ignored the rest of the time. Still, I tried to stay grateful. I cooked breakfast for the kids before school, mowed the lawn, fixed the leaky faucet, little things that made me feel useful. And every time Emma hugged me goodnight, I felt a flicker of the life I used to have. Until the morning, I overheard Claire on the phone. "I can't keep cleaning up after him, David. He leaves crumbs on the counter. The whole house smells like bacon, and the kids start copying him. He's 72, not 5. I told you, this can't go on forever." Her voice was sharp, low, the kind you use for gossip or cruelty. I stood by the hallway door, holding the screwdriver I'd gone to fetch, my heart pounding so hard I thought she'd hear it. "He's your father," David said quietly. "And I'm your wife," she snapped. "We have to think about the kids. It's not healthy for them to see this kind of dependency." Dependency. That word stung worse than any insult. That night, I packed a small bag. I wasn't planning to leave, not yet, but something inside me needed to be ready. The next few weeks blurred together. Claire got colder, David busier, and the kids started whispering more than laughing. Luke avoided me at breakfast, afraid his mother might see him talk too long. Only Emma stayed the same, always slipping into my room after dinner, pretending she needed help with homework just so she could sit beside me. "Grandpa," she whispered one night, "Mom says you'll move soon. Is that true?" I looked at her, at those brown eyes that looked so much like Mary's, and I lied. "No, sweetheart, just rumors." She smiled, small and brave. "Good. I like having you here. If only love could pay rent in someone else's house." The breaking point came in early spring. David had gone on a business trip, leaving me alone with Claire and the kids for 3 days. On the second night, I made dinner, just something simple, chicken and potatoes, the kind Mary used to make. When they came home, Claire wrinkled her nose. "You cooked?" I nodded, trying to sound cheerful. "Thought I'd give you a break." She looked at the table, then at me. "Tom, this isn't how we eat. It's just chicken. With butter and salt and... Is that gravy?" I said nothing. Luke was already reaching for a plate when she caught his wrist. "Don't. Grandpa's food isn't healthy." That word again. Not kind, not appreciated, not thank you. just unhealthy. I sat there, watching her order takeout while my dinner cooled untouched. When she told the kids to clean their rooms, I started clearing the table myself. My hands were steady, but inside I was shaking. I didn't say anything that night, but I decided something I hadn't dared before. If they didn't want me in this house, I'd make sure they learned what life looked like without me. The next morning, I woke up early. The sun was barely up, the house quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I stood in the kitchen, looking at the framed photo of Mary and me on the counter, the one Claire kept moving behind the blender. "I tried, love," I whispered, "but I think it's time." By the time Claire came downstairs, I was dressed in my old denim jacket and holding my keys. "Going somewhere?" she asked, sipping her smoothie. "Just out for a walk." She didn't even look up. "Don't forget your phone, in case you get lost." I smiled, though it wasn't a nice smile. "Don't worry, Claire. I know my way home." But that morning, for the first time, I wasn't sure where home really was. What I didn't know then was that my quiet walk would set off a chain of events that would change everything. The house, the family, even those who thought they didn't need me. Because sometimes, when people push you out, they don't realize you were the one holding the whole place together. And they only learn it when it's already too late. You ever walk away from a place and realize the silence behind you is louder than any noise you've ever heard? That was me that morning, hands in my jacket pockets, cool spring wind cutting through the neighborhood, wondering if maybe I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. I didn't have a plan, didn't even know where I was heading. I just knew I couldn't sit in that house another day pretending not to notice how unwelcome I'd become. I ended up at Riverside Park, the place where Mary and I used to walk when we were young and stupid and thought life couldn't touch us. The benches were still there, the same peeling green paint, the same smell of wet grass and sunlight. For a second, I let myself remember what it felt like to belong somewhere. I must have sat there an hour before I noticed a man in a red jacket jogging by. When he stopped to stretch, he looked at me and grinned. "You all right, sir?" I laughed softly. "Define all right." He chuckled, sitting on the bench next to me. "Fair enough. You look like someone who's either thinking about retirement or running away from it." "Maybe both," I said. His name was Carl, mid-50s, a retired contractor who now managed some rental properties. We talked for a while, just small talk about the weather, the park, how expensive everything's gotten. But when I mentioned living with my son, his expression changed. "I tried that once," he said. "Didn't end well. My daughter thought I'd just fade into the background quietly. Turns out I'm not very good at disappearing." Something about that hit me square in the chest. "What did you do?" I asked. He smiled. "Bought the background." That line stuck with me. He explained how, after his wife passed, he sold the old family house and invested in small rentals, places people like his daughter and her husband always complained they couldn't afford. Now, when they talked down to him, he'd just nod and smile, knowing half their rent checks ended up in his account. "Revenge by property management," he said, laughing. "But really, it's about dignity. People forget how much value a lifetime of work has until you remind them." I didn't know it then, but that conversation would become the seed of something bigger, something that would make Claire's smug little smile vanish for good. When I got back that afternoon, the house felt colder than usual. Claire was at the kitchen island with her laptop, probably managing her clients. She didn't look up. "Long walk?" "Yeah," I said. Cleared my head. "That's good," she murmured. "Routine helps at your age." At my age, like 72 was some kind of medical condition. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat in the guest room with my phone and an old notebook of Mary's. She used to keep everything in there. Grocery lists, birthdays, even the number for our old insurance agent. On the last page was something I'd forgotten about. Contact information for our lawyer, Mr. Halpern. The man had helped us refinance the house years ago. He owed me a favor. I called the next morning. "Tom Carter?" he said, his voice bright with surprise. "Haven't heard that name in years. How's Mary?" I swallowed hard. "She passed, Halpern. Cancer." "Oh, I'm sorry, Tom. She was a good woman. What can I do for you?" "I need some advice," I said, "about property and maybe options." He hesitated. "You still own that lakeside lot, don't you? The one you bought back in the 80s? I froze. You mean that old acre near Pine Hollow? That's the one. I remember you almost sold it once, but Mary said to hold on to it. Couldn't have been smarter. They built a resort up the road a few years back. That land's worth a fortune now. I hung up a half hour later, hands shaking. I'd forgotten all about that lot. Barely an acre of scrubland by a lake where Mary and I once planned to build a cabin. I'd paid $4,000 for it in 1983. Now, Halpern said it could fetch close to $300,000. For the first time in months, I smiled. That night, I made dinner again. Chicken, mashed potatoes, the works. Claire came home late, tired and tense, and wrinkled her nose as soon as she smelled it. Tom, we've talked about this. We eat clean, grilled fish, vegetables. I know, I said, keeping my tone calm. But tonight's special. She frowned. Why? I looked her straight in the eye. Because it's the last time I'll be cooking in this kitchen. She blinked. What are you talking about? I'm moving out. Her lips parted, then pressed into a thin line. Tom, I didn't mean... You meant every word you've said since the day I moved in, I interrupted softly. And that's fine. You don't want me here, and I don't want to be where I'm not wanted. David came in halfway through the conversation. What's going on? Your father's leaving, Claire said, arms crossed like she was announcing the weather. He looked stunned. Dad, where will you go? I'll figure it out, I said. Been doing that my whole life. Emma started crying quietly at the table. Luke just stared, confused. Sweetheart, I told her gently, I'm not going far. You can visit whenever you want. Claire opened her mouth, maybe to protest, maybe to celebrate, but I didn't give her the chance. I went to my room, packed my bag, and walked out before anyone could stop me. That first night, I stayed at a cheap motel near the lake. The place smelled like old carpet and regret, but it was mine. No rules, no lectures, no one watching my every move. I sat on the bed, staring at the peeling wallpaper, and laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. Freedom, even when it's lonely, still tastes sweet. The next morning, I drove out to Pine Hollow to see the land. It was just as I remembered, quiet, peaceful, the lake glittering in the early sun. For a second, I imagined Mary sitting beside me, smiling like she used to when she saw a project coming together. All right, love, I murmured, let's build something again. By noon, I'd called a local realtor. By evening, I had 3 offers, each higher than the last. By the end of the week, my bank account looked healthier than it had in 20 years. That's when the idea took root. If my family didn't see my worth living under their roof, I'd show them from a distance. And this time, they'd never see it coming. A month later, I found the perfect place. An old farmhouse 2 towns over, half renovated, with enough land for a small garden and a workshop. The realtor looked at me, surprised. You sure you want to buy this by yourself, Mr. Carter? It's a lot of upkeep for one man. I smiled. I'm not one man. I'm a man who remembers how to work. I moved in quietly, no fanfare, no forwarding address. For the first time in years, I felt alive again. Hands covered in sawdust, the smell of fresh paint in the air, music playing from the old radio Mary used to love. A month later, I got a letter from Emma. Not a text, a real letter, written in pencil and folded 3 times. Grandpa, the house feels weird without you. Mom says you needed space, but I think she misses you too, even if she won't say it. Luke asks about you every day. Please come visit soon. I read that letter at least 10 times, then tucked it into my wallet. I wanted to visit. God, I did. But something told me to wait. Let them sit with the emptiness for a while. Let them understand what they'd pushed away. And then, one quiet Saturday morning, the phone rang. Tom Carter? A man's voice asked. Yes. This is James Langley from Lakeside Realty. I understand you're the original owner of 12 Meadow Ridge Drive? That's right. Sold it recently. Well, he said, I represent a buyer who's been trying to reach you. She's very interested in speaking personally. Offered well above market value if you'd consider meeting. Who's the buyer? I asked. There was a pause. Then he said a name that made my coffee freeze halfway to my lips. Claire Carter. I set the cup down slowly. You're telling me my daughter-in-law wants to buy my land? Yes, sir. She mentioned something about an investment opportunity. Seemed quite eager. For the first time in weeks, I laughed, a deep, full laugh that echoed through the empty farmhouse. "Well," I said, "tell her the owner's willing to talk." Because Claire had no idea that the man she wanted to outsmart already had a plan that would turn her perfect life upside down. When life hands you irony, you either choke on it or pour yourself a cup and sip it slow. I chose the latter. For days I couldn't stop smiling at the thought of Claire, Miss Healthy Lifestyle and Modern Living, trying to buy the same piece of land she once called that dusty old lake nobody cares about. The irony was rich enough to serve with dessert. I met her realtor on a Wednesday morning at a small cafe by the highway. The kind of place where the coffee tastes like burnt hope, but the pancakes are heaven. James Langley, a sharp-looking guy in a gray suit, spotted me immediately. "Mr. Carter, pleasure to meet you." He extended his hand with the easy confidence of someone used to selling dreams. "Mrs. Carter should be here any moment." "Mrs. Carter," I repeated slowly. "Funny how that still sounds strange when it's your son's wife trying to buy your property." He laughed politely, not sure if I was joking. Then the bell above the door jingled, and in she walked. Designer coat, sunglasses bigger than her confidence, and that same self-satisfied smirk she wore when she told me not to cook unhealthy meals. "Tom," she said, sliding into the booth opposite me, as if this were just another polite family brunch. "You look well." "Freedom agrees with me," I said. She smiled thinly. "I heard you sold the lake property. Shame. I was hoping to make an offer before you did." I leaned back. "You're a little late. Papers are signed." Her expression flickered. "I see. May I ask who bought it?" I stirred my coffee, pretending to think. "Let's just say it's in good hands." She hesitated, then leaned forward. "Tom, I know things were tense between us, but I'd like to make amends. David and I have been considering a vacation home for the family. Somewhere peaceful. The kids would love the lake. You'd be welcome there any time." I nearly laughed. The sudden warmth in her voice was as fake as the diamonds on her bracelet. "Claire," I said gently, "you don't have to lie. You want the land because the resort's expanding and you're hoping to flip it." Her smile froze. "Excuse me? Your kind calls it investment. My kind calls it greed." The realtor looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. "Maybe we can—" "It's all right," I said, keeping my eyes on her. "I'm not judging. I just find it funny that you spent months wishing I'd disappear, and now you're chasing what I left behind." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. "You think I'm doing this out of spite?" "No," I said. "I think you're doing it because you've never built anything of your own. You just attach yourself to what others made and call it progress." Her cheeks flushed. "You always twist things. You think the world owes you something because you're old." "No," I said quietly. "I think the world owes me nothing. That's why I built mine from scratch." She grabbed her purse and stood up. "Enjoy your little victory, Tom. Don't expect sympathy when that land becomes worthless again." She stormed out, leaving the smell of expensive perfume and bruised pride behind. The realtor exhaled slowly. "Well, that was lively." "Tell her I said good luck," I said, dropping a 10 on the table. "She'll need it." What Claire didn't know was that the land wasn't gone at all, not really. I'd sold it to a company I'd just formed, Carter Lake Holdings, LLC, and I was the only shareholder. It wasn't about money, not entirely. It was about something bigger, legacy, the chance to create something that couldn't be taken away by a sneer or a signature. That night, I sat on the porch of my farmhouse, watching the moonlight dance across the fields. I could almost hear Mary's voice in the breeze. "You're smiling again, Tom." "Yeah," I whispered. "But this time, I'm not doing it for them." Days turned into weeks. I poured myself into rebuilding the property, hired local contractors, cleared brush, restored the old dock. The lake, once overgrown and forgotten, started to look alive again. I didn't tell anyone. Let them think I was just an old man fixing a shack. Then, one morning in June, a familiar car pulled into the dirt driveway. It was David's. He got out looking 10 years older, exhaustion etched into his face. I hadn't seen him since the night I left. "Dad," he said quietly, walking toward me, "you've been hard to find." "Wasn't hiding," I said. "Just living." He looked around. You did all this yourself? Mostly. Some help from folks who still know how to swing a hammer. He kicked at the gravel. Mom would have loved it. That one sentence, simple, soft, hit harder than I expected. Yeah, I said. She would have. We sat on the porch steps for a long while, watching the water. Finally, he spoke. Emma's been asking about you nonstop. Claire doesn't like it, but... He hesitated. The kids miss you. So do I. I studied his face, the tired eyes, the lines around his mouth. You okay, son? He sighed. Not really. Things at home are... tense. Claire's been different since you left. Colder, controlling. Sometimes I don't even recognize her. You married her, I said gently. Not her potential. He smiled weakly. You always did have a way with words. We talked for hours about the kids, his job, even Mary. By the time he left, something had shifted between us. Not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding. 3 days later, Emma showed up, alone. She'd biked all the way from town, helmet askew, cheeks red from the heat. Grandpa, she shouted as she pedaled up the driveway. You weren't kidding, it's beautiful. I helped her off the bike, heart swelling at the sight of her smile. Does your mother know you're here? She thinks I'm at a friend's house, she admitted, grinning. I just wanted to see you. We spent the afternoon fishing off the dock, just like I used to do with her father. She talked about school, her friends, how much she hated the new diet her mom was obsessed with. She says sugar is poison, Emma said, rolling her eyes. But Grandpa, life without ice cream is worse than poison. I laughed until tears blurred my vision. For a moment, it felt like the world had rewound 30 years. Before she left, she hugged me tight. Grandpa, when I grow up, I want to live somewhere like this, somewhere that feels like you. After she rode off, I sat on that dock long into the night, replaying her words, somewhere that feels like you. That's when the idea came, the one that would change everything again. If my family couldn't see the value in me, maybe I could give my grandchildren a place that would. A future built from something real. So I called Mr. Halpern again. Remember that LLC we set up? I asked. Of course. I want to amend the ownership. He paused. To include your son? No, I said softly. My grandkids. Tom, that's quite a move. I'm not doing this for gratitude, I said. I'm doing it so, when they grow up, they'll have something that came from love, not pride. He was quiet for a long time. You know, Tom, most men your age think about inheritance. You're thinking about lessons. Lessons last longer. That night, as I sat watching the stars, my phone buzzed with a text from David. Claire found out you still own the land. She's furious. Says she's going to call you tomorrow. I smiled. Tell her I'll be waiting, because some lessons have to be taught face to face. The phone started ringing at 7:03 a.m. Sharp. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Only one person could make a phone ring like an accusation. Good morning, Claire, I said, picking up. There was a pause, sharp, deliberate. Then her voice came, smooth as glass. You think you're clever, don't you? Some days, I said, sipping my coffee. Depends on who's asking. Don't play coy, Tom. I know what you did. You never sold that land. You hid it behind some company name like a criminal. I prefer the word owner. Sounds more dignified. You lied to me? I didn't lie, I said calmly. You assumed. I just didn't correct you. I could almost hear her pacing through the kitchen on the other end, manicured nails tapping the phone. Do you have any idea what you've cost me? I already had a buyer lined up. Developers were interested in building vacation homes near the resort. Do you know how much money you're throwing away? I smiled. Enough to sleep well at night. God, you're impossible, she hissed. You could have given that property to your family, to us. You're not my family, Claire, I said, my tone quiet but steady. My family doesn't try to push me out of my home, insult my cooking, or make my grandchildren afraid to speak to me. David said you'd overreact, she snapped. He warned me you'd make this dramatic. Funny, I said. I thought he stopped warning you about things after you stopped listening. Don't bring him into this. Oh, but he's already in it, I said softly. You made sure of that the moment you tried to erase me from his life. For a second, the line went dead quiet. Then she laughed, a short, brittle sound. You think you're teaching me some moral lesson, Tom? You're not. You're just an old man clinging to what's left. You might be right, I said. But at least what's left of me still means something. Then I hung up. I sat there for a while after that, staring at the sunlight spreading across the wooden table. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt tired in a way that reached deep into the bones. Winning against people you love never feels like winning. A few days passed before I heard from anyone else. Then one afternoon, my phone buzzed again. It was David. Dad, can I come by? Alone. When he arrived, I could see he'd lost weight. His shoulders slumped, and there was a look in his eyes I hadn't seen since Mary's funeral, the look of a man breaking quietly so no one would notice. We sat on the porch, 2 mugs of coffee between us. The silence stretched until it became something fragile. Claire told me about the land, he finally said. She's furious. I gathered that. He rubbed his forehead. She says you're trying to sabotage us. I'm trying to save what little family we have left. He exhaled slowly. Dad, she's not perfect, but she's trying. Things have been hard since you left. The kids, Emma especially, keep bringing you up. Claire feels like she's competing for their attention. Maybe that's because she is, I said. And losing. He frowned. You could try to understand her side. I did, son. Every day I lived in that house, I understood her side. And her side always ended with me being smaller. He looked away, jaw tight. You're making this impossible. No, David, I said gently. I'm making it honest. The wind picked up, rustling the trees. I could see him struggling, torn between loyalty and truth. Emma wrote me a letter, I said softly. Told me she misses the smell of bacon in the mornings. Said the house feels colder now. You know what that means? He didn't answer. It means the warmth wasn't in the walls, or the furniture, or even the fancy meals Claire orders. It was in family, and you let her throw that out like trash. David's shoulders sank. I didn't know how to stop it. You still can, I said, but not by defending her, by remembering who you are. He stayed quiet for a long time. Then, almost in a whisper, he said, I want to bring the kids to see you, just for a weekend. That small sentence felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. You don't need my permission, son. This place is their home, too. That weekend, the truck pulled up again, David driving, Emma and Luke in the back, faces bright like it was Christmas morning. They jumped out before the engine stopped. Emma ran straight into my arms. Grandpa, you fixed the dock? And the swing, Luke shouted. 2 working hands and a little stubbornness can fix almost anything, I said, grinning. Claire didn't come. I hadn't expected her to. We spent the weekend fishing, grilling, laughing. The kind of simple days that make you forget the rest of the world exists. On Saturday night, as we sat by the fire pit roasting marshmallows, David turned to me. Dad, I'd forgotten what this feels like. What's that? Peace, he said quietly. Just peace. I poked the fire with a stick. It's been waiting here the whole time. You just had to show up. Later that night, after everyone went to bed, I stood on the porch watching the stars. I could hear the frogs singing by the lake, the crickets humming their tired song. For the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. But peace never lasts long when someone's determined to destroy it. Monday morning, as David packed up the kids, his phone rang. I didn't need to ask who it was. His face said everything. He stepped outside to answer. I stayed inside, listening through the screen door. Claire, calm down, he said. No, we're just leaving now. The kids are fine. Pause. He didn't poison them, for God's sake. I froze. Poison them? Another pause. Then his voice grew sharper. You can't keep saying things like that. He's their grandfather. He paced the porch, rubbing the back of his neck. Claire, stop. This isn't about property. It's about you not being able to stand anyone being happy without you. He ended the call with a sharp swipe and stood there breathing hard. When he turned toward me, his face was pale. She's losing it, he muttered. Said if I keep bringing the kids here, she'll file for separation. I leaned against the doorframe. Then you've got a decision to make, son. He looked at me, eyes wet. I don't want to lose my family. Then don't, I said softly. Just remember who's in it. He nodded slowly, like a man seeing a path for the first time. Dad, can I ask you something? If things fall apart, could we stay here for a while? The question hit me like a prayer. You don't even have to ask. He smiled faintly. Claire would hate that. Then we'd be off to a good start. He laughed, a real tired, grateful laugh. That night, after they left, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the old photo of Mary again. Her eyes seemed to twinkle, like she'd just heard a secret. You were right, love, I whispered. They just needed time to see. But the truth was, time was running out. I didn't know it then, but Claire wasn't done fighting. She wasn't just angry, she was plotting. And the next move she made would bring everything crashing down. I should have known Claire wouldn't stay quiet for long. Women like her don't lose gracefully, they reload. It started with a letter, hand-delivered by a man in a suit who looked too polite to be dangerous. Mr. Carter? He asked, stepping onto my porch. That's me. He handed me a crisp white envelope. You've been served. 2 words that can freeze even the strongest man. I tore it open. Petition for injunctive relief. Legal language so thick it could choke you. The gist was simple. Claire wanted to stop me from unduly influencing my grandchildren. According to her, I was manipulating them against their mother, creating emotional distress, and undermining family stability. I laughed out loud. Undermining stability? I said to the lawyer's back as he hurried to his car. You should have seen her after 2 glasses of wine. But when the door closed and the laughter faded, the anger set in. I wasn't angry for me. I was angry for the kids, dragged into a war they never asked for. By that evening, David called. His voice was low and tight. Dad, she filed something. I swear I didn't know. I believe you, son, I said, but she's crossed the line. He sighed. She says it's temporary, just to keep the peace. Peace? I said. There's no peace built on lies. He didn't answer. I could hear the kids in the background, Emma crying, Luke asking what was wrong. That sound hurt worse than any insult Claire had ever thrown at me. The next morning, I called Mr. Halpern. You still remember how to ruffle feathers? I asked. I'm retired, Tom, he said, chuckling. But for you, I can dust off the claws. I explained the situation, every ugly detail. He listened patiently, then said, She's playing with matches in a fireworks factory. You want me to make a few calls? Do it, I said. Over the next few days, something strange happened. The same lawyer who'd served me reappeared, only this time looking a little less confident. It appears, he said, flipping through his papers, that Mrs. Carter's claims were premature. Our firm will be withdrawing the injunction. I leaned against the porch railing, enjoying the view. Premature, I repeated. That's one way to say baseless. He cleared his throat. Between you and me, Mr. Carter, she may have overplayed her hand. Between you and me, I said, she's been overplaying her whole life. But this wasn't over, not by a long shot. 3 days later, David showed up again, alone this time. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. She's gone too far, Dad. She told the kids you're unstable, that you left because you couldn't handle Grandma's death. I clenched my fists. She's using grief like a weapon. She even told Emma that you sold the land because you needed gambling money. That one made me laugh out loud, sharp and bitter. Gambling? The only bet I ever lost was believing she had a heart. He sat down heavily. I don't know what to do anymore. You stand still, I said. Let her spin herself dizzy. Dad, trust me, I said. I've got something in motion she doesn't see coming. Because while Claire was busy spreading stories, I'd been busy building something real. The farmhouse project had grown faster than I imagined. The old barn was repaired, the fields cleared, the lake dock rebuilt. And in one corner of the property, a small 2-story building had started to take shape. The sign I'd just had delivered read, The Carter Center for Community Trades. It was Mary's dream, something she'd scribbled in her old notebook years ago. A place where kids can learn skills, not just grades. I'd taken those words and turned them into blueprints. By midsummer, the center was nearly finished. Part workshop, part classroom, part memorial. Local contractors had pitched in for free once they heard the story. You're doing God's work, Mr. Carter, one of them said. World needs more hands that know how to make things. Maybe so. When I unveiled the project publicly, I invited the local paper to write a piece. The headline read, "Retired Grandfather Builds Education Center in Honor of Late Wife." Within a week, donations poured in. The story spread. Schools reached out. Sponsors offered tools and materials. And that's when Claire called again. "You're on the news," she said flatly. "So I heard. You used our family name." "Our," I said. "Last time I checked, you only borrowed it." "People are calling, asking if we're involved. They think we're part of your project." "Well," I said, "if they ask, you can tell them you were inspiration. You taught me everything I didn't want to be." She made a sound halfway between a growl and a laugh. "You think this makes you noble? It just makes you look desperate." "No," I said softly. "It makes me look busy doing good while you're busy destroying your own home." And right then, a small voice piped up in the background of her call, Emma's. "Mom, is that Grandpa?" "Go to your room," Claire snapped. "Don't yell at her," I said. "This conversation is over," she hissed and hung up. But it wasn't. A week later, on the day of the center's ribbon cutting, a crowd gathered. Reporters, locals, and, unexpectedly, David and the kids. Claire didn't show, but her absence was a gift. Emma ran straight into my arms again. "Grandpa, this place is amazing." Luke tugged my sleeve. "Can I hammer something?" "Only if you promise not to hit your sister," I said, grinning. David shook my hand. "Dad, this is incredible. Mom would have been proud." "She was the blueprint," I said quietly. The ceremony began. Cameras flashed. The mayor gave a short speech about community legacy. And when it was my turn to speak, I looked out at the crowd, faces young and old, curious and kind. "I built this place," I said, "because I was told I didn't belong anywhere anymore, that I'd become a burden. But the truth is, none of us ever stop having value. Sometimes the world just forgets to notice." The crowd went quiet. I saw David lower his head. Emma squeezed my hand. "I wanted my grandkids to know that worth doesn't come from money or titles or how perfect your house looks in pictures. It comes from what you build with your own hands and who you build it for." Applause rippled through the air. For a moment, I felt something warm spread through my chest, something that felt like forgiveness. After the crowd dispersed, Emma stayed behind, tugging my sleeve again. "Grandpa," she whispered, "Mom was watching." My stomach tightened. "What?" She pointed toward the hill across the road. There, near a parked SUV, I saw a familiar figure, sunglasses, arms crossed, watching from a distance. Claire. Our eyes met across the field. She didn't wave. Neither did I. She turned, got in her car, and drove off. I watched until the dust settled. Somehow, I knew that wouldn't be the last time I saw her. The look on her face wasn't defeat. It was calculation. And I'd lived long enough to know what that meant. The next time she showed up, she wouldn't come alone. When you've lived 72 years, you learn to recognize the quiet before a storm. The morning Claire came back, the air was too still, too heavy, like the world itself was holding its breath. I was in the workshop, sanding the edge of a birdhouse Luke had started, when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. I looked out through the open barn doors and saw a black SUV pull into the drive. Out stepped Claire, dressed like she was meeting investors instead of her husband's father. Heels, sunglasses, that sharp-edged smile that never reached her eyes. But what made my stomach tighten wasn't her. It was the man stepping out behind her, her lawyer. I wiped my hands on a rag and waited by the porch. "Morning, Claire," I said. "You're early for the apocalypse." She ignored the joke. "I came to talk about the center. You'll have to buy a ticket like everyone else." Her lawyer spoke up. "Mr. Carter, my client believes the use of the Carter family name for your organization may cause reputational harm." I raised an eyebrow. "Reputational harm from helping kids learn how to fix a leaky pipe?" Claire crossed her arms. "You made this about us when you named it the Carter Center. People think we're partners. I can't have my husband's employer and clients calling about your project." "It's not a project," I said. "It's a legacy." "You're embarrassing us," she snapped. "All these interviews, the local news segment, do you know how it looks when they show your broken-down farmhouse on TV and call it the Carter estate?" I took a slow step closer, until I could see my reflection in her sunglasses. It looks honest, Claire, something you wouldn't recognize if it bit you. Her lawyer cleared his throat. Perhaps we can resolve this amicably. If you'd agree to remove the family name, my client would consider. I cut him off. You tell your client this name doesn't belong to her. It belonged to Mary long before it ever touched Claire's credit card. I earned it pouring sweat into 2 jobs while she was busy bleaching her marble countertops. Claire's jaw clenched. You can't talk to me like that. Sure I can, I said. You just don't like hearing the truth without a filter. Her lawyer looked increasingly nervous. Maybe we should, but Claire wasn't done. You think this little charity makes you better than me? It's pathetic, Tom. You're clinging to a fantasy. You live alone in a shack playing saint while your family falls apart. Then maybe you should have held it together, I said quietly. For a moment she faltered. Her chin trembled. Barely, before she straightened again. David's filing for separation, she blurted. I said nothing. She looked at me, desperate now. You did this. You poisoned him against me. No, Claire, I said. You did that all by yourself. I just stopped pretending you were right. She turned to go, but I stopped her. Claire, I said softly. She hesitated. You think control is love. It's not. It's fear. And someday when you're standing in an empty house wondering why no one's calling, you'll understand what you traded away. She didn't answer, just climbed back into the SUV and drove off, tires spitting dust into the morning sun. When the sound faded, I felt a hand slip into mine. Emma. She'd been hiding behind the porch rail, eyes wide. Is it true? She whispered. Are Mom and Dad splitting up? I crouched down, pulling her close. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes they can't unmake, I said. But that doesn't mean everything's broken. She looked up at me. Dad said we might stay here for a while. I smiled. Then I'd better make more pancakes. That night, the farmhouse filled with voices again. David carrying boxes, Luke dragging a stuffed dinosaur, Emma setting her school books on the table like she'd been living here forever. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever is, but it felt right. The laughter came back, tentative at first, then stronger, like a song remembering its melody. Days passed, they settled in. David helped around the center, fixing gutters, mowing fields. Emma tutored younger kids in the afternoons, and Luke became the official tool fetcher. Each evening we'd eat together. And sometimes David would glance at me across the table and just nod, a silent apology, a thank you, maybe both. Then one Friday evening, as the sun sank low and painted the lake in gold, I found him on the dock staring at the water. She signed the papers, he said quietly. I stood beside him, the boards creaking under our weight. You okay? He nodded slowly. I think so, for the first time in a long while. You did what you had to. He looked at me. I should have listened to you sooner. You listened when it mattered. He smiled a little. Emma said you're putting her name on the foundation's board when she turns 18. Is that true? Already written down, I said. And Luke too, when he's ready. It's theirs as much as mine. He exhaled, long and shaky. You built something, Dad. Not just this place. You brought us back. Your mother always said love isn't about holding on, I murmured. It's about building something worth coming home to. The lake shimmered like a mirror, catching our reflections side by side. The old man and the son he almost lost. A week later, the paper ran another article. Carter Center becomes family haven after storm. There was a photo of me with Emma on my shoulders, Luke holding a hammer, David smiling behind us. Underneath, the quote they used made me laugh. Family isn't who stays under your roof. It's who helps you rebuild it when it falls. That night, as I closed up the workshop, I looked toward the stars and whispered, We did it, Mary. The wind off the lake carried her answer in the rustle of the trees, a sound that felt a lot like forgiveness. For the first time in years, I wasn't angry or lonely or lost. I was home, and for the first time, so were they.